We're talking biggest busts, potential busts right now on Fantasy Football Today Express. Jamie, I got a problem with this topic. You know me. I'm just such a positive person. I love every player. And I have a problem. I can't figure out any busts. They're all going to be great.
Nice guy.
I know. You know me. The fantasy, think of a name. Fantasy guy who loves everyone. Yes.
Fantasy smiles. That's you.
There you go. Fantasy smiles. Fantasy hugs and kisses. Okay, so who are some busts at the quarterback position?
Quarterback is tough for me because it's such a deep position that I don't really look at it and say right now that I want to see what the ADPs are, because that's typically how it drives it for me. So it'll probably end up being Lamar Jackson or Josh Allen, depending on who goes first in the first round. I just can't justify taking one of those guys that early based on how the position goes year over year, where we get somebody or two or three guys that come out of, the undrafted pool or the late round options that are just close to that production, or at least productive enough that you get, standout performances. And some guys last year, Jaden Daniels, clearly, he was, if drafted as a starter, a late round starter. Baker Mayfield was a superstar. Bo Nix was a, capable starter for, the back half of the season. It just doesn't make sense to reach for those guys early. So I understand why they're being drafted early, because, we talk about not losing your league when you pick these volatile players in the first couple of rounds. And these guys are typically standout quarterbacks for a reason, but I just can't justify taking them in the first round. So we can skip quarterback for now. That's more of a ADP conversation. I'll start at the top, though. It's a guy that a lot of people think is, first overall, and that's Saquon Barkley for me. I won't be drafting him a lot if he's going in the first 5 overall picks. Clearly, he was amazing last year. I was excited about him last year, and that proved itself to be better than I think most people's expectations, because the tush push didn't crush him. He ran for over 2,000 yards. He was, a superstar in every, aspect of the game, and looked like the guy that we saw early in his Giants tenure. But based on everything that he's coming off of, the workload is too much. The history of 2,000-yard rushers, there's a slight decline, for almost all these guys. There have been 8 prior to him. He's the 9th guy to ever do it in NFL history. And 2 of the 8 got hurt the next year, in Terrell Davis and Derrick Henry. And so the track record is just not in his favor of being as good or better. And so, we talked about this just on the full length episode. We talked about maybe doing an episode about this, drafting guys at their ceiling. Most first round picks are getting drafted at their ceiling anyway, but it feels like everybody's expecting him just to roll out and do the exact same thing they did a year ago. And for me, that's a little bit too hard to justify.
Yeah, Barkley, he, in addition to the downfall, not the downfall, the decrease in production, Jamie, that you see from the 2,000-yard running backs, pretty sure every single 2,000-yard running back has lost at least 1 yard per carry from the previous season. So the efficiency is going to go down. He averaged 5.8 yards per carry, and he only was on pace for 35 catches. So his profile is really not that different from Derrick Henry's, right? I mean, Henry had 19 catches, Barkley had 35. It's not nothing, but they're both kind of lower catch guys. Rely a lot on touchdowns, efficiency, workload. Henry goes a lot later than Saquon Barkley. So, for what that's worth. All right, any other busts you want to talk about, running back?
We go with the guy that was in news this week, and that's Alvin Kamara. Looking at the situation now, quarterback play could be awful. So we know that the scoring potential for the Saints could be pretty bad. You've done a great job illustrating how bottom offenses, what they produce, it's usually at least one good running back or one good wide receiver. And I think he'll still be good. But we're talking about a guy that missed 3 games last year with a groin injury, is 30 years old now. I think we'll lose some touches to whether it's Kendre Miller or Devin Neal, who they drafted. And who knows what Kellen Moore will do in terms of throwing the ball to him as much. Remember, this was somewhat of a seamless transition for the coaching staff when Sean Payton left. It was a lot of the same guys stayed, and Dennis Allen kind of continued a lot of the same things that they were doing. And I don't know if Kellen Moore is going to do that. I mean, you just mentioned Saquon Barkley's receptions. We know Barkley's been one of the best pass catching running backs in his tenure in the league, and they did not do that. And so, whether it's Tyler Shuck or Spencer Rattler or whoever it is, I mean, think about the quarterback potential of this team. It could just be completely awful. And so we know he doesn't score a lot of rushing touchdowns to begin with. And he's not going to get better running the ball at his age with this offense. So if the receptions I don't want to say crater because I don't think that's going to be the case. But if they come down 20 receptions, more than that, like it could be awful for him. So he's somebody that I'm terrified of, even in PPR.
All right, Alvin Kamara and Saquon Barkley. All right, we're going to take a break, come back and talk wide receivers and tight ends, bust potential right after this on FFT Express. All right, so how about some wide receivers?
I'll start with Mike Evans. Last year he finished the season amazing once again, and did a good enough job before he suffered the hamstring injury and was out for 4 games. But when you go back to those first 7 games, it was week 7 when both he and Chris Godwin got injured. He was not the best receiver on his team. Chris Godwin was outperforming him by a significant margin. It was like 5 PPR points per game at that point. And so he had some spike games in there, but clearly was not the same guy. He was averaging around 14 PPR points per game. He finished better than that in the back end of the season. Well, what did the Bucs do? They re-signed Chris Godwin and they drafted a receiver in the first round. And so while Evans should still be the best receiver for the Bucs, and you can sit here and say Ibuka may not play very much in his rookie campaign, and Godwin's coming off a significant injury, may not be the same guy. Those are valid arguments. But you also are talking about Mike Evans turning 32, and we know the track record of those guys. So for me, I'm almost certainly out on Mike Evans if you have to draft him in the first 3 rounds. And every draft I've seen so far, he goes basically in the first 3 rounds. Round 4, I think, is worth the gamble. Anything after that is certainly a steal. But for me, I don't plan on targeting him very much this season. I think it's going to be frustrating to be in the Mike Evans camp because of all the mouths to feed in Tampa Bay.
Yeah, also another thing I never really talk about, and I don't know if this is going to happen again, obviously, but Baker Mayfield, weeks 1 through 9, he averaged 35 pass attempts per game. Weeks 10 through the postseason, he averaged 30.3 pass attempts per game. And they went 4-5 in their first 9 games. They went 6-3 down the stretch when they were running the ball more, throwing it less. Now, I think the schedule had a lot to do with that. They had some easier opponents there. But I guess I wouldn't be too surprised if they were a little bit more conservative, a little bit more run heavy this year than what we might expect. Okay, anyone else you want to talk about?
I'm trying to find my list so I give you all the accurate ones.
While you do that, Mike Evans was the number 23 wide receiver per game with Chris Godwin first 6 games of the year. He was on pace for only 119 targets. Godwin was on pace for 150 targets in those 6 games. It was a big role reversal really for Evans. Once Godwin got hurt, Evans became the clear alpha. What do you got?
It's pretty crazy, right? How much better Godwin was.
Yeah, it really is. He was top. He was the number 2 receiver, or number 4 per game. Anything else? Sorry, I'm trying to kill time for you.
Yeah, Davante Adams still scares me. I know we talked about this the other day, but going from the 1 to the 2, I don't know if I'm going to call him a bust, but it's just somebody that makes me concerned. So you look at the situation for the Rams. It's great, right? He could be Cooper Kupp. Kupp was off to a great start, but what if Adams is not that guy? And the way that they finished the season, how Cooper Kupp's role devolved, and it was all Puka Nacua. Again, 32-year-old receiver. Is he going to still produce at that level? I'm concerned, and I think there's reasons to be a little bit worried about Davante Adams, especially again based on how fantasy managers still value his name and what he was able to do with the Jets. Well, remember what he was with the Raiders when he didn't have Aaron Rodgers? It wasn't great.
Well, the 1 year he was great.
No. I mean, last year before the trade.
Oh, last year, yeah.
It wasn't great. And we're talking about a guy that was, if I remember that correctly, I think I have like 14 PPR points per game. That's nerve-wracking. If you're taking him in the 3rd round to be, that caliber of player. So this was what it was. 3 games with the Raiders, he was at 14.9 PPR points per game. Very serviceable number to receiver if that's what he's getting, but that's more toward the back end of the position as opposed to the front end. So still makes me a little bit concerned going to the Rams, knowing that Puka is going to get so many opportunities, and we've never really seen Davante Adams clearly in the number 2 role, and I think he'll be in the number 2 role.
And this is another team, the Rams, that got very run heavy down the stretch. Weeks 13 through 17, Matthew Stafford threw 24, 30, 27, 19, 32 passes. Playoff win against Minnesota, he threw 27 passes. Then he threw 44 in the loss to Philadelphia. But this is another team that might want to be very run heavy if they're in the right game script, if they're winning games, and they probably will win a good amount of games this year. All right, that's it for Jamie and me. I'm Adam Aizer. That's it for Fantasy Football Today Express. We will talk to you next week. Have a great weekend, everybody.